Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. In this video I'm going to be going over the latest build I've been using in the Awakened King DLC for Remnant 2. This build is what I've been using in Apocalypse mode against both bosses and the open world, and I call it the Rampaging Ritualist. I will be explaining what items I'm using and why I'm using them as we go through. The goal of the build is to apply status effects to as many enemies as possible and boost those statuses to supplement the damage that my weapons are dealing by themselves at the same time as generating self-healing through lifesteal. Before I get into it fully, I do want to preface that in the current patch of the game, statuses are bugged to where the total damage they apply is fixed, regardless of the duration that the status lingers for, meaning that increasing the duration of statuses is a DPS loss, as the damage per tick is reduced and the status is applied for a longer duration. Despite the bug, I'm still finding the build overall to be really effective, and it will only get better once this bug is fixed, unless Gunfire decides to nerf some parts or all of the parts in the interim, so let's get into it. I'm going to start off with the archetypes and traits first because they are the most influential parts of the build. The rest can be tweaked and changed depending on how comfortable with the game you are and how comfortable with the game's mechanics of items that you are, so don't feel like everything here is a must. It's just something that I like to use, so let's get in. For our prime archetype, we're going with the Ritualist. This is because of the prime perk that the Ritualist has called Vile. Vile spreads statuses that are active on any enemy to all nearby enemies within 15 meters of the target upon that target's death, as well as increasing the damage of the applied statuses. The Wrath perk also increases all damage by 20% and adds 10% critical chance when attacking an enemy suffering from status effects, altogether allowing for some very quick ad control and room clearing with indirect damage over time effects, while also buffing our damage output against beefier targets such as aberrations and bosses. For the skill from Ritualist, we're going to be using Death Wish. Death Wish prevents us from healing with relics and drains 300% of our health over 20 seconds, in exchange granting 10% lifesteal and 35% increase to all damage dealt. This boost applies to gun damage, mod damage, status damage, and melee damage. It is all damage sources. The lifesteal also applies to all damage sources. Death Wish may seem costly, however there is a way to negate that 300% health drain downside, which I'll get into later. For the secondary archetype, we're going with Challenger. Challenger's Close Quarters perk increases all damage by another 35% and critical chance when within 10 meters of an enemy, extending to 20 meters before it all falls off. And the Face of Danger perk grants 10% all damage after using a relic within 10 meters of an enemy. The Challenger skill we're using is Rampage. Rampage increases fire rate by 15% and reload speed by 25%, as well as movement speed by 15%. Dealing damage while Rampage is active resets the timer and adds a 2.5% range damage increase, stacking up to 10 times. At 10 stacks, the base effects of Rampage are doubled and our damage increase is a total of 25%. Now onto the traits. Affliction and Strongback are the archetype traits. We're given those. We can't get rid of them. Fortify, Kinship, Ammo Reserves, Vigor, Spirit, Expertise, Handling, Barkskin, and Siphoner are all going to be maxed out. Spirit and Expertise are given 2 points each from the archetypes, and Endurance is given 1. Spirit and Ammo Reserves can be swapped out for something else if you want. They aren't necessary for the build to work, I just like having faster mod generation and more ammo. Fortify is for extra damage reduction from our armor, Barkskin is 10% flat DR. Handling tightens the spread of our shotgun, and Siphoner is 3% base lifesteal. Now, Kinship may seem weird at first glance, however it is essential for the build to work. This is because the health drain from Death Wish, as stated earlier, is treated as self-damage. Self-damage is damage that you deal to yourself. It's in the name. Kinship reduces both damage you deal to allies and damage you take from allies. You're allied to yourself, allowing Kinship to double dip into its 80% friendly fire damage reduction. This results in a 96% self-damage reduction, meaning the 300% health drain from Death Wish becomes 12% of your health over 20 seconds, or 0.6% health per second. With Vigor maxed out, this equates to 0.78 health drain per second, practically zero. I do not know if this is an intended interaction between Death Wish and Kinship, so it may get changed in a future update. For weapons, we're going to be using the Sparkfire Shotgun with the Blood Draw mod and Fetid Wounds Mutator, the Krell Axe with the Tainted Blade Mutator, and Starshot with the Twisted Wounds Mutator. Sparkfire. The Sparkfire Shotgun innately sets enemies on fire. And with the Fetid Wounds Mutator, it applies corrosive damage, 1 critical hits, and weak spot hits, and Blood Draw allows it to apply bleeding. Fetid Wounds also has the added benefit of increasing our critical chance for each negative status effect type is applied to an enemy. With these mods and Mutator combined with the primary fire, that is 3 unique status effects applied to a single enemy from one gun, maxing out that 15% increase crit chance. Throwing the Kel Axe applies Overloaded. Tainted Blade allows melee weapons to apply Corroded on charged melee attacks. Throwing the Krell Axe is a charged melee attack, so it applies both the Overload from the Krell Axe mod and the Corrosive from the Tainted Blade Mutator at the same time. Starshot's Big Bang applies burning damage, and the Twisting Wounds Mutator applies bleed, just like the Fetid Wounds Mutator mentioned before, and it increases range damage of that gun by 20% to bleeding targets, but that's not really important. Starshot's not really our main weapon. All in all, from just our weapons, that's 2 sources of bleed, 2 sources of fire, 2 sources of corrosion, and 1 source of overload. That is a lot of status effects. For rings, we're going to be using the Alchemy Stone, Hardcore Metal Band, Atonement Fold, and the Band of the Fanatic. Our amulet is the Nightweaver's Grudge, and our relic is the Tranquil Heart. Atonement Fold has some nice synergy with Alchemy Stone, Hardcore Metal Band, and Nightweaver's Grudge. Atonement Fold self-inflicts bleeding. We want that bleeding because that allows it to synergize with the previously mentioned rings. Nightweaver's Grudge gives 20% crit chance and haste when 15 meters away or less from a bleeding entity. Alchemy Stone gives 6% lifesteal when you're afflicted with a blight. And Hardcore Metal Band grants 25% damage reduction through 5 stacks of Bulwark from taking damage. With Atonement Fold, you're always bleeding, so you're always taking damage, always afflicted with the negative status effects, so all 3 of the aforementioned triggers have 100% uptime. Band of the Fanatic is likely to not remain part of the build due to the status damage over time bug mentioned previously. The ring reduces status duration by 65% and increases their damage by 25%. In the current build, both of these effects are net positives, as the duration reduction increases the damage per tick of status effects, and the 25% bonus is just a flat bonus to the total damage of those statuses. In a future patch, this ring may be better swapped out for the Timekeeper's Jewel, which extends status effects durations. For our relic fragments, we're going to be using Armor Effectiveness, Weapon Spread, and Rage Quick Chance, all mythic. Our armor is the full Leto Mark II set, granting 291.7 armor with Fortify and a relic fragment, and 98 heavy roll with Strongback. With the DR bonus from Barkskin and Bulwark, this totals 73.5% total DR. With all effects coming into play, from everything, so from Death Wish, from Rampage, from the Amulet, from the rings, you have a 100% increase to all damage dealt. Double damage. 37% faster fire rate, 19% lifesteal, 40% increased status damage, 40% increased damage to all crit chance with a further 25% crit chance to our shotgun, and a 57% faster reload. The build is very aggressive, designed to self-sustain in Apocalypse while dealing out considerable damage. It is not face tank everything and out heal build. You can still die if played carelessly, which is why I do encourage you to only use it as a template for your own builds. Some traits can be swapped, some rings can be swapped, and even the armor can be swapped depending on what you as a player want. Don't be afraid to experiment. Anyway, that's it for the build. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Feel free to drop the builds you guys have been using. It would be fun to try some. Thanks for watching, and at the end, I'm just going to put some gameplay of Venom against these build. Enjoy. Okay.